just from the need from several pastors that would talk to my father about who did our social media. And so it launched into a business and just did it part-time for a while, took it full-time back in the middle of 2022. So that's what I do. We've since branched out from just doing social media to now we actually help pastors with business coaching. We help them with ads and campaigns like that to get more people into their building. And I'm really pivoting more now towards the business coaching for pastors. And so my wife and I also own and operate what's called Kupa LLC. Kupa it's kind of a play on our last name, Kupa, but also it's a Shoni word, an African word that means to give. And so through that company, we do business coaching for anybody. So not just for pastors, but for anyone who desires to start a side business, to get into coaching, mentorship, run some kind of agency of some sort, similar to what I do with Five Talents. We actually coach them in a program to do that. And so we enjoy doing that together, and those are the two things that I'm involved with.
Let's give them the hand for their introduction. So again, it's not about me, but since I'm moderating, and the reason why I'm moderating is because many of you know I was in business with District Elder Usher, and after we in turn was no longer in business, I started branching out and doing some other things that I was already doing. But I looked up one day, I looked on the internet and I heard people talking, I was like, I got 5 streams of income. I got 6, 7, I got 7 streams of income. Because really the day of just having one stream of income, especially pastors, is gone. Unless you have a big church or you have other ways or your cost of living is down. But it's very common now for pastors to not only pastor but have other streams of income. And I think you really should, and that gives you some freedom to the point, because when you're only sometimes dependent on the church income, if any of you pastor, you know that church people can be very fickle. And sometimes they give, and you heard different people talk about if they get upset with you, how they show you is through the plate and their feet. Right. So, and because I went through a church split, but long story short, I was looking one day and a particular person was talking, I said, I wish I had about 4 or 5. And so I started counting the streams of income that I have, and I was up to about 7. But what I'm saying to you is that sometimes when we think about other streams of income, we think that we have to be like a District Elder Usher, where we have to do a large company or a large thing. But there's smaller things, as you heard from Bishop Hawkins, that he helps people repair their credit. So there's a lot of, so like with me, this past year, I had a license to referee basketball. So I said, you know what, if I'm gonna pay for the license, they're gonna pay me. So it doesn't pay a lot of money, but they raised the pay up to the point I could do 2 junior high games and make $110. But my point I'm saying to you is that if you have other ways creative to make income, that when you need money for different things that God puts on your heart, you have to have ways to do that. The money's just not gonna come out of heaven. What God does is he gives us revelation where we can use our hands, or we can use our talents, or we can use our aptitude. So one of the ways that I found that I can make money is refereeing, and over about a 2 months span, I was doing it not really for the money, but I was doing it for the exercise. So in about a 2 month span, I made about $2,000 just running up and down, blowing the whistle, and coaches getting mad at me, but I had the final say, and I was leaving with the paycheck. Then, I also notarize, and you can make money being a notary. So there's all kinds of things. So when I started looking at all the ways, then I branched out into investing in properties, and then I had businesses. But at the end of the day, I don't want you to be intimidated when you see such large scale things, that some of you in here can do smaller things. And even Sister Billy would tell you that she was working for that foundation, and I kept saying, well, maybe you need to do business for yourself. So she's branched out now, and she's doing business for herself and making some pretty good money doing what she does. So let's start back with this. So Pastor Cooper, just tell this audience, so because I know you was a high school teacher, you went to school for 4 years, you got a college education, and you was going to be a teacher. You was teaching for about 6, 7 years. 8 years. So you walked away from teaching. You went to a total different career. You started working in a funeral home for 2 years. You was apprenticed for director, and right when you got to the end of that, you left it all with 2 mouths to feed, 2 little babies. You know, like you ever see a bird in a nest and the bird's waiting for the worm. So he had 2 children at home, walked away from a stable career, those who are in here that maybe have a dream of maybe walking away from a job because you wasn't pastoring then and your wife wasn't working, she was doing her own little business. What does it take, and what are some of the challenges that maybe an individual who's thinking about starting a business that you had to deal with mentally, and then what did you have to overcome them in order to branch out and do what you're doing?
Yeah, so great question. A lot of times it's focusing your mind on the life you want to live. For me, I realized I did not enjoy having somebody tell me when I had to come to work. I did not enjoy somebody telling me when I could take off. I did not enjoy getting home at 5:30 on a good day if I didn't have to stay late, having an hour or 2 with my children before they got to go to bed. I got tired of that. And I said, this can't be all there is. And so it's tough. The final straw for me was I had a close friend in our church who passed away and wasn't family or anything like that. And I went to my boss at the funeral home, great man, wonderful man. But I asked him, I said, hey, I have this funeral to go to, such and such date and time. Is that okay? And he just kind of hesitated, didn't really answer. And so, as a matter of fact, I had texted him that. Let me get the story straight. I texted him that. He did not respond. I passed him in the hallway maybe an hour or so later. He didn't say a word about it. And that, for me, that simple moment for me was it. I said, and later on, he ended up saying, you know, hey, I really need you that day. It's not immediate family, so, and it hurt me so much. So I said, that's it. That's it. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to be able to position myself to not have to rely on this paycheck. And so a lot of times it's just the belief, the motivation for the kind of life you want to live, and then just believing that it's possible. Some of the people I've coached before, and I don't recommend doing this unless you're at that point. One of the young men from my church who I was coaching in the business space, he just basically said, I'm putting my 30 days in and I'm just going to do it. Now, I don't recommend doing that unless you know that you're serious about it, because you're not going to come back at me and say, hey, I need something to eat, right? But he did that. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do. When you've gotten to the point where you're fed up, you say, I'm stepping out on faith, and I make that decision, right? Only do that if God leads you to. But sometimes just that motivation is all you need to be able to say, I'm going to make this work. I don't know how, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I'm going to make this work because this is not the life that I desire to live anymore. Hopefully that answered the
So
question.
I just want to clarify, and then I'm coming to you, District Usher, because I have a question for you. So in order to be clear, you said you need faith, but another thing that you did is before you went full-time, you was doing it part-time.
Yes.
So what do you think a person needs to do to launch out in an entrepreneurship? Because you have to have some kind of experience or skill set or coaching so that you know what you're doing even when you don't know what you're doing. So what did you do to prepare for that moment? Because you said faith, but faith ain't blind. Faith does have some work. So what works did you do in preparation to make that step?
So I had already established my company. I was already helping churches. I maybe had 5 or 6 clients that were paying me about $200 a month. So it wasn't anything crazy. I had an additional $1,000 a month. So I had to get down to the numbers, right? How much do I need to be able to walk away from my job? So you have to get super clear on what I need, and then you have to get super clear on what's in my hand. What do I already have? If I have 5 pastors that are willing to say, hey, I'll pay you $200 a month to run my social media, that means I can get 10, right? So it's having clear direction on what I need to be able to do, and then that's where the faith kicks in. I'm going to step out by faith and do this, but yeah, you have to have something that you're working with. And what I would say, everybody in here, every one of you has something that somebody would pay you for.
Right.
If you're taking notes, write that down. I have something somebody would pay me for. Some of you may have never heard that before. But there's something unique to you, a gift, a talent, and get this, a lived experience. There is somebody who would gladly pay you a lot of money for you to help them through something you've lived through, that you can expedite the time it'll take for them to get through it. They would pay you for it. The problem is you haven't put it together and you don't offer it. So everybody has that in their hand. It's just a matter of cultivating it.
All right, so I think another misconception about being in business for yourself is that you get somebody else to do the work. And even as you get to a certain level, that you can just chill and not do anything. And again, because I know Pastor Cooper, even when I was going to the nursing home and he was dealing with his dad, he had the flexibility, but even when he was dealing with his dad, he was still working. He had his computer there. So, District Usher, tell us from your experience, what does it take to be successful as far as work ethics as an entrepreneur? Because again, working with you, you always got that phone, you always got that computer somewhere close. I know you're a very hard worker, but there's those who don't understand that there's some perks to it, but there's some sacrifices and there's some work ethics that you must have if you're going to be successful.
I just think the answer to that question depends on the type of business you decide to start. Every business is not the same. So depending on what the business is, that's going to determine how much work you have to do yourself personally. I started off with a tax business. I was a franchisee with Jackson Hewitt. And when I say started off, that was my first for-profit business. There's several different types of businesses out there. You'll have to decide what type of business you're going to have. But my first for-profit business was this Jackson Hewitt. We started with one office and grew that office so much in the first year I had enough to purchase a second office, and then we purchased 4 offices. So it grew very, very well. In the beginning, my experience was I wanted to learn every phase of the business, and so I worked my own business. So my work ethic was I needed to learn every part of this business so I can see how it flowed. I watched the money come in for 1 year before I touched anything. I wanted to see what kind of problems I would have, what kind of staffing issues I would have. So I worked that business every single day. And once I was able to learn the business and learn all facets of the business, then I was able to hire accordingly. I could understand what I wanted the business to look like. Now, if you're looking at franchising, you could do it 2 different type of franchises. And I'm going a long way around to get to your answer, but there's 2 different types of franchises. Some allow you to purchase like new territory. That means no business is there. You're gonna work a lot harder there because you gotta develop the business from the ground up. So that means you got to hire the workers, you got to get the clientele, you got to do a lot of marketing and advertising to start it up. And then you can go franchise where you purchase somebody else's business. Maybe they retiring or something like that, and you go and take over a business that's already developed. That means I have the employees, I have the clientele, I have everything. So that's what we purchased when we purchased the first Jackson Hewitt franchise location. It was already staffed, it was already developed. So I had time to get in there, learn and grow. Now with Amazon, I started fresh, right? So I had to build that business, no employees. I did have the client Amazon, so that helped, but I was working like 16, 18-hour days. It was just me and my daughter. Again, in that business, every business that we have, my daughter and I, we learned every area. I dispatched, I drove, I did accounting, I did HR, I was everybody, until I was able to hire staff. And then now at this point, going from working 14, 15-hour days, I work 1 day a week. I go into the office for 4 hours on Mondays, usually if I'm in town. But all of the other time, I'm usually working off my phone or my computer. And we have dispatchers, we have administrative people, but we had to build that. So sometimes when you start a business or you're looking for that second stream of income that includes a business, you do need an investment of time, is what I call it. I'm investing this time because I'm looking for something bigger where I don't have to personally go into the office.
Sure. Just to add to that, one of my business coaches taught me this a few years ago, and they said the best entrepreneurs, the ones who grow and scale their businesses, are quitters. He said you have to be a good quitter. And I'm like, what does he mean? And his point is exactly what this girl was saying. You have to get in there and do it often at first, and then you quit and you hire somebody else to do that part, right? Then each time, at each phase of it, you do it for a while, you make sure you understand it, you do that, and then you quit. And then that's how you can take a business where maybe it started off one thing, you can grow it into an empire because you've learned how to be a good quitter.
All right. So, District Elder Usher and Pastor Cooper, both of them employ people. I think Pastor Hawkins basically works by himself. I choose to work by myself because I don't want to deal with employees. They can be dealt with that then, and then I had a store and I was dealing with employees. So there's some benefits with both. So Pastor Hawkins, you both basically work by yourself. So what is the benefits that you found, or the challenges that the benefits, number one, of working by yourself, and then the challenge that you have just working by yourself?
So it varies. Depends on what I'm doing, because there are certain things that I do for certain clients that I don't do for another. So sometimes I may have my daughter help me out with some things on the side, or have her take on some things. But the advantage is just what you said. I don't have to deal with a lot of people. I go at my own pace. When I'm ready to do it, I do it. When I'm ready to stop, I can stop because I control that. And the other part of it is that by working by myself, I have time to continue to learn. I think any good business owner or entrepreneur, you never stop learning. It is continuous. You never stop. It's ongoing. There's always something that you can learn about, which I'm always tapping into the IRS, seeing what's changed or what's new, because I need to tell my clients that, hey, what you're doing, you can't do that anymore, but you can do that now, or what have you. So those are some of the advantages. Now, some of the disadvantages is you have to come to a place to where you start to learn to manage your time, because I'm pastoring a church, I'm traveling, preaching at the same time. So now I have to learn how to manage my time. It's in those instances where I wish I would have trained someone more. But with the type of work, and I think it has a lot to do with the type of work you're doing as well, when you're dealing with very sensitive information from churches or people that are trying to start a nonprofit or whatever, that's very sensitive information that they're entrusting you with. So you have to be very careful with who you allow into that circle. So I think that takes someone, again, that's just as passionate as I am about the business. So I would say that's the disadvantage.
Okay. The next question I want to ask you, in my experience, and I need y'all to give me some grace, but on this. But in my experience, us black folks, I see a lot of people who have good skill sets, but are very poor with business. And what I mean by that is, I know people who are already entrepreneurs. They want you to pay them like they're doing business as a professional, but yet they're not professional. So they're paying them cash. They don't have the business set up properly. And one of the things that, as an entrepreneur, if you don't have your stuff set up and you're not paying taxes properly, it's going to hurt you if you try to do bank financing. And one thing as a business owner that I'm learning and I've already known is that you can set up a business today, in about a month or two, if you have good personal credit, you can start getting business credit. But you have to have it set up properly. So from those of you who are sitting here, what have you done as a business owner so that you don't get labeled? You know how black folks, y'all understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yes.
You know, sometimes we'll go pay somebody else more money because our own individuals, we don't think that they're really competent or really doing business like they should, so we'll go give the money to someone else. What have you as individuals, y'all can chime in as you want, with this mindset, what have you tried to do, number one, to make sure that you're having your stuff done properly, because you also need it set up properly to have the proper write-offs so you're not paying a lot of taxes, and then also that you're not labeled as a ghetto business?
Yeah, so I'll start off. So, for example, one of the first businesses that I had owned a bus company in the city of Toledo, Ohio. Only black-owned entrepreneur bus company. Got up to 7 coaches, and one of the problems was that our people would come, and just because they were black or African American, they automatically expected me to give them a rate or a discount, or because, oh, well, this is the church, man, it's the church. But my bus note cost the same amount as the white company's bus note. So what I did to counter that, I made sure that I had just as nice equipment as anybody else has. I valued myself. I think a lot of times we take away value from ourselves because we feel like if a person just gives us a look, no, you gotta name your price. You gotta look them straight in the eye and mean what you say when you name your price. And if you say it costs $3,500 to do this job, you say $3,500 with a straight face, and either gonna do it or they're not gonna do it. But it costs me the same amount of time as it costs someone else. And I think having good references helps a lot as well. I think that counters a lot of things when a person can go to your website or when they can talk to other people that have done business with you. That's one of the things that have helped me a lot. Even outside of our organization, you can go into Kojic, somebody knows me, I've done work for them. You can go into AME, I've done work for them. You can go into PAW, I've done work for them. So it's like, you know, placing that value and having people to be able to speak well of you, that also helps as well. But I don't back down with what I charge or what I say because I worked very hard to get to that point. I labored to get to that point.
And I would just add a couple things here, because I see it from multiple perspectives. One, you need a good attorney. So I would contract an attorney, an accountant. You want to build a core team around you that's going to help you make sure that you're compliant. Because when I went into business, I didn't know all of the laws. But I had enough wisdom to put people in my circle who had the expertise that I did not. I will tell you that sometimes, depending on the type of business that you have, those people in that inner circle change. Because the people that were in my inner circle when I was in a smaller business couldn't help me when I got to large business level. And so there was a lot more expectations of reporting, and I have to pay a lot more money now with a larger business than I was with a smaller. So look at it from that standpoint. If you don't know anybody, contact your small business associations. There's one in every single area with experts that can help you out. And even if you need a business plan or some grants or loans or anything, the Small Business Association will help you with those things, or they'll point you in the right direction. I would say, for me, I have tried to stay away from labeling my business in African American business. When we first started out, the business that I owned, none of my brothers and sisters came to support me. And so even the people I went to church with or the people I thought was cool, they knew I was starting a tax business, but they stayed away from it. And so I had to see outside the box. I think we limit ourselves when we put ourselves in these boxes. I'm an African-American owned business, and so I'm going to deal with my people, and that's it. Sometimes your people going to keep you poor. If you're trying to get to the next level, sometimes you got to go outside your people. But my business was mostly white people. It was most of them did not look like me. And I had to understand that mindset. When Jackson Hewitt invited me to a $1 Million Circle, which I only had like 5 offices at that time. Some of those people had like 60 tax offices, but I was invited to be a part of this circle and to just hear how millionaires talk and how millionaires think. But when I left that session, some of them invited me to their operations in their cities, and this was white, Asian people that invited me in, flew me in, paid for my hotel, took me to all of their businesses, and showed me what they were doing to be successful. I went outside of my culture, but I can tell you the same thing you see in black-owned businesses is happening in white business. We try to make it black and white issues, but the white people can be ghetto too. They can be ghetto too. So what you have to do is talk to God. I stay in relationship with him, and he's going to make sure that I have what I need for my businesses. I remind my team that we need to be professional, because although I'm trying to not be labeled in one of those buckets, people put us in a bucket. So if they come in there and they wait too long, they're going to say, you ghetto is the black business. I ain't going because I had to wait an hour. Well, you go right down the street to H&R Blocks and you wait 2 hours and I don't see no posts on Facebook, right? So we try to be professional. You want to make sure you stay professional, but some stuff is going to come up that when your black sisters and brothers or anybody throw shade on you, you got to keep going. I'm going to tell you, I don't know a millionaire that somebody's not throwing shade on them. They waiting to throw shade, but you got to keep on moving in spite of.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. I would just add to that. I mean, I would echo everything that was said. I would add to that just making sure you don't cut corners. I think it's easy to sometimes see, oh, well, I could probably get away with doing it this way and nobody would know, and this was cut costs and all that. But you cut corners one time, it's easy to do it over and over. So I would say avoiding cutting corners, and then also understanding, and I love what Suffolk Bishop said, the price is the price. You have to stick with that. And the temptation is, well, this is family or this is someone I know. And there's times you can make those concessions, right? But that can't become your standard practice, because you won't be profitable, you won't be in business long, and plus everybody will come to you looking for that handout. So you have to stand firm on that. And lastly, I would say to piggyback on that statement is understand that you're not going to serve everybody. Right. Be okay with people saying your price is too much, you're ripping people. Okay, that's fine, then you're more than welcome to go somewhere else. I have no problem. So being willing to let people walk. That's been one of the things that was hardest for me to learn, but especially in our circles, working with pastors I know, and they knew my father, and sometimes you got to let people walk and be okay with that. And so that's just what I would add to what was already said.
So I'm gonna ask maybe 1 or 2 questions. I think we're scheduled to go to 3:30, and then if you're listening and you have a question, we'll open it up. I think the next question that I want to ask, or what I've experienced, is that a lot of times people won't support your business, but they ask you questions like, how's the business going? So like I had a store, I did a Facebook post, and I had an organic store, and as Usher was saying, I had family members, I had people who I thought was my friends, never stepped in, but every time they see me, how's the store? It's almost like pastoring. How's the church going? So much they like what you say. We're doing terrible. We ain't selling no. But we've talked about, one of the things about, if you do a Google search, you're going to find when it comes to millionaires and people who make the most money, it's entrepreneurs and it's people in sales. So one of the benefits of being in business with yourself, again, I think you heard Pastor Cooper say, it's a numbers game. So if you want to make a certain amount of money, you have to hit a certain amount of goals. But one of the benefits of being in business for yourself is you can determine how much money you make. So it's you can determine what your schedule is. But there's also some downfalls of being in business. So I want the panel to talk about the flip side of business, because everybody's not, like I told you, originally I thought, I don't want to be in no business, I don't want to worry, I don't want to, but then, as I'm getting closer to retirement as a pastor and realizing this lifestyle I want to live and the ways that I can do that is creating other streams of income. So how can I do that creatively? I've opened myself up and realized that I am equipped to do it where I thought I wasn't. But nevertheless, what are some of the downfalls or the pitfalls or the headaches from going to your level where you have, I think you say you have like 60 employees or something, or 100?
We're at about 86.
80, yeah, and I think you have about 4 or 5 or something like that, 8 employees. So from employees, from all of the weight of the business being on you, from people hating on you, let's talk about that flip side, because it ain't all peaches and cream. Go ahead, whoever wants to go first.
I'll say the best part about running a business is it's all up to you, right? How far you go is all up to you. How much money you make is all up to you. The hardest part about running a business is it's all up to you. Same thing. So, when your family's looking at you, like, you got to make this work. And so when you step out on faith, right, like this, to launch a business, walking away from a career where you have tenure and those kind of things, you got to be sure that that's what you want to do, because now you're out there and there's no going back. I was talking to my wife the other day. Someone asked me, would you ever go back to teaching? And I said, absolutely not. And the reason isn't because I don't love the kids. I love the kids. I love social studies, what I taught. But I could not go back to being dictated to what my day looks like. And I mentioned that earlier. So for me, it's like, this is the decision I made. The downfall is I don't have nothing to fall back on. If I go back to teaching, I'm starting at level 1. Where my salary is going to be level 1. So that's the biggest downfall. It's the blessing is it's all on you, and sometimes the curse can be it's all on you. And people look and you say, oh man, you live a great life, you've got this and you've got the freedom and all that, but they don't know that that's also comes with a lot of pressure and responsibility. And so you better be sure that you're cut out for it, I'll say.
Yeah, I like what Pastor Cooper was saying as well. One of the downfalls, and I want to be very transparent, is people. People are one of the downfalls. And here's what I mean by that. When people know that you're now doing something, people tend to try to want to hold you back from where they once knew you, and not realizing, like, I'm at a whole new place now. So here you are, you done started this business, and you are excited, and you want to share it, with the world. And a lot of my business has to do with, churches and colleagues and other people. And I literally had people right in our organization, don't fool with Hawkins. You ain't seen me in 25 years. Right. You don't know what God has done in my life since then. Right. I probably surpassed you in yours, and you're sitting up here telling people, don't deal with me. So that's the reason why I say people, because when people know you from back then, anybody want to know anything about me? I wrote a whole book about it. It's in the PAW bookstore. Go and read it. You can find out anything you want to know about Pastor Hawk. They loved it so much, the organization bought several hundred copies of it. So you can go find out whatever you want to know. But I'm saying we have to be careful that we're not our own worst enemy, because a lot of times we can see someone, they're like, oh, such and such started a business. And then right behind that is a negative statement, or it's a negative seed. And I think that's one of the hardest things to overcome. But also, being a business owner, you have to have great adaptability. Yes. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to allow some things to roll off of your back, because those times are going to come. Everybody that smiles in your face and say congratulations on your business does not mean it. Right. Sorry to say, they do not mean it. So to me, that's the downside.
I would say one of the downsides is the expectation from people. So when you get money, some people expect your money to be their money. And everybody wants something from you. They assume you have it to give, and they hold you to it. Now, they haven't patronized your business. They haven't worked the hour in your business, but they expect something from you. I think it's the biggest thing. And then you have not only people expecting it, you have every church you go to, when they call in an offering, they could be calling your name, calling you out to stand up. They expect you to do something. And I think for me, that's one of the hardest things, because we can't help everybody. If we give all of our wealth and resources away to everybody that's asking, then we can't properly manage our business or our own personal finances. So we have to be selective. And unfortunately, when you say no, sometimes you become the bad man or woman, and then they can start talking about you and the rumors. They got all that money over there and can't give $100 in offering. But like the gentleman said earlier, well, what you gonna do with my $100? If my $100 gonna pay for your meeting, then I don't want to give it to that. Now, if you're doing something in your community, I might want to give you $100. Or if it's gonna bless a family person, I might want to do that. But people tend to want to take our wealth, and they want some ownership to it. The other thing that I've found challenges with in some of our local churches and some of our local councils, again, is, especially in the local church, our church, we have a problem with some of them wanting to give because they see our wealth. So we can't say the church is going to we have a HVAC issue. They expect us to do it because they say, what, we got it. So the assumption that we have everything and we don't need anything, I think that can be one of the downfalls or downsides. And if you're not equipped to handle it, then it can mess you up. But I thank God that you business owners, you have to have relationship with God. I preach it to all of my Sunday school students every Sunday. You have to have relationship with God, because problems hit us every single day. I'm dealing with somebody right now that just had an accident, right? And so are they going to tear somebody's yard up? Or here's an IRS notice. Every day you're dealing with an issue, and you have to be able to handle issues as a business owner.
All right, this is my last question. So as Christians or believers, business is business, but yet you're still Christian. You're all pastors, right? And the Bible says that we should be men in business. So we'll say this is business. Right. But I believe that as Christians, we don't do business as non-Christians. So how do you navigate? Because that's what people are going to say. Well, you're supposed to be a Christian. Right. So how do you navigate not just being a Christian doing business, but a Christian business person? Get the difference?
So I think I get the difference in what you're saying. And one of the things that I do in my business, and I would encourage anyone to do that your business associated with people, is everybody is not meant to do business with you. Right. So I think when you do those interviews, or you do those consultations, regardless, I've met with companies and they're like, hey, yeah, we want you to build our business credit profile. But as I listen to them talk, they're expecting this to happen, in 45 days. Mm-hmm. And when I hear them and I listen to that, so that I don't get put in that category where you're supposed to be a Christian, right, I do a lot of consulting and conversation and interviewing before I take that person on as a client. And me and my daughter, we've had some doozies, and people pay their money, and 7 days later they calling you like, what up? It's like, it took you 15 years to get yourself in this position, but you're ready to come out of it in 30 days. Like, really? So I think, doing the proper interviews, a consultation is very important. And so we kind of take away from you're supposed to be a Christian and that type of thing, in my opinion.
I mean, am I out of the have y'all heard people say that?
Yes,
Okay, or
all
just
the
make sure.
time. I would say yes all the time. I hear it in my business. Initially, I would hire church people. And I did initially, not no more. You can't work for me if you go to my church. It just creates too many problems. Just because they expect more, like you, I know exactly what you're saying. They expect more from us, and so usually people who work for your church or in your organization, they come with expectations that usually a person off the street ain't coming with. They want a special schedule. They want to take off and call off when they want to, or they'll say that, if you don't accept that and allow them to do whatever they want to do, then, you're a Christian, and she says she's a pastor. They'll throw that in your face often. And so my husband, he started off in the business with us. And so he has a pastor's heart. And sometimes it can be a conflict with business. Because when my husband was in the office for the short period that he was in the office, people would come and they would have to be fired. We would have to suspend, we would have to terminate because of them being in violation. And he would want to take them in his office and have counseling sessions. And then he would come back to me and say, can we just give them one more chance? And the answer was no. We already gave them 5 chances. There's not a 6th chance, right? And I'm a Christian and I love God, but people will say you're not being godly because you didn't give them a 6 or a 7 or an 8 chance to get it right. And so you do hear that all the time. But when you have a business, it's important that you have an employee handbook that governs your company. You have those policies and procedures in place, and you follow them to the letter. I make sure we don't have no favoritisms. If you go to my church, you don't go to my church, you're in my council, I treat everybody that's an employee the same. And you can say whatever you want about me. They talked about Jesus is what I say. But if you don't follow the rules, then you have to find somewhere else to work. I had a young lady just the other day I had to let go. And because I knew her and she visited the church a couple times, I said, you got 2 weeks to find a job. If I didn't see you in our church, you would have been fired today. So I give them a little grace, but they're going to talk about you no matter what, Bishop.
Yeah, I would say making sure you have good record keeping. Mm-hmm. So that goes a long way. If somebody says you said something and you got, let me go to the video call we did and I can show you that's not what I said. Or that's one thing that is important to do. And then also it just goes back to being okay with not having to serve everybody. Being okay with with everyone not being your customer. And what that looks like, I mean, I've had it before, you're supposed to be helping churches, why are you charging? And, you get that conversation. And they said, well, do you go to work for free? Okay, and then they're like, well, no, okay, well, then neither do I. But being okay with that conversation and, letting, and being okay with ending the conversation, you're supposed to be a Christian, you're supposed to be a pastor. I am a Christian, I am a pastor, and I don't think we're a good fit to work together. Being okay with saying that. And usually that will, no, I'm not. When you tell them maybe we're not a good fit, that a lot of times changes the whole tone because now you've put it back on them and say, no, I don't need you. I would love to, I'd love to serve you and work with you. But when you let them see that, they're not calling the shots and that you don't need them, you love to work with them, you don't need them. A lot of times that will make them backtrack on that whole, well, you're supposed to be a Christian, and it can change the conversation.
All right, I'll just make a short comment, and if you have any questions, but I hope that you're hearing what they're saying. Number one, you can't always do business with people that you go to church with, and a lot of times they're not going to do business. And secondly, you can't always hire people that you have a relationship with. Sometimes you should value relationship more than you value the business because that business sometimes will create strain in a relationship. I've hired church people who worked at the church, and I've hired people who are part of my family, and they tend to want concessions like I know you pay on Friday, but can you cash at me today?
Right.
You know, or, you know, have people clean my Airbnb, you know. You paying this amount, well, you haven't cleaned it yet. When you clean it, you're gonna get paid.
Right.
So you can't be afraid to make sure that you are consistent, like you heard, and you just hold them accountable, because they're gonna hold you accountable. And as long as you're fair, you need these policies and procedures. And again, make sure that, again, as a Christian business person, the Bible talks about business. It tells you that if, you know, a lot of times we think this is related to debt, and people have made this mentality where it says, owe no man nothing. That's not talking about bank loans. That's talking about you getting someone service and you not paying them. He that borroweth and don't pay it back. Guess what that is? Wicked. So when you sign your credit card, you're borrowing money. So the Bible does talk about a lot about business. So as Christian business people, if you follow what the Bible says, there's nothing wrong with getting paid. You know, the labor is worthy of the hire. It says all of that. So again, can you put your hands together for what you've heard so far? Hopefully they're inspiring some of you that maybe have a business, no matter what level. Maybe it's just a part-time business. Maybe it's a small business. Maybe it's, again, like notarizing or just something small. Or maybe you have big dreams. But whatever you're doing, if you do your part, what I found in my experience, that I try to do my due diligence. I just open up venue. And opening that venue, I spent about $2,000 paying someone who coached that. And this is God's honest truth, most of what they coached, the Lord had already gave me that already, but there was a few components that 2,000 was worth. Like one of the things or tidbits that they said like, don't let a person have confetti, don't let a person have candles. Right. You know, where I paid $2,000 for one tidbit, but me having candles and it could burn my place down and cost me a whole lot of money. So sometimes what you don't know, and that's again, in our race, we're afraid to pay for information. We pay for entertainment, but we won't pay people for information. And what you don't know in a business sometimes can either help you make money or hurt you. And there's always going to be a sacrifice. So you're going to sacrifice up front or you're going to sacrifice later. So I trust that, you know, that you've heard something. Any of you have some questions by what you've heard? Yes, ma'am. So Elder, I'm waiting for your question.
And I tell
Okay, we want to give some, Elder Heisen, we want to give some other people to ask questions, so get to your question. If you have it, or you're writing your comments up. All right. And I said, thank you, Jesus. All right. Can you put your hands together for her reminded as if you give? And she has a little side hustle. She has a room in her house that she Airbnbs and makes some extra money. Mr. Trainum, you have a question back there?
I think when you don't know somebody, I had a recommendation, but if you don't know somebody, the Small Business Association is really good about making recommendations for experts. But definitely get along somebody who you know that's research. Get along, get close to somebody that has the type of business that you want to start or is in business. If you know somebody that's an entrepreneur and they're doing very, very well, walk up to them and try to introduce yourself. And you know, a lot of people ask me for my business card, and I share my business card, and they'll ask me questions, and I'll share, because a lot of stuff you don't know. I didn't just, I went to college, I have a college degree, and I have training, but a lot of stuff I did not know about business that I learned later on. But start with the Small Business Association. I wish somebody would have told me that. They have all kind of resources for you, all kind of contacts, and then look for somebody that you can buddy up with and just be able to ask them questions. A lot of times, especially with women, there's a lot of resources out there for women-owned businesses, but a lot of times women tend to compete with each other, and you stay away from somebody who could actually give you some help. I would advise against that. If you have somebody in your local church, get next to that person, support their business, patronize their business, because you'll never know who you would need, and hopefully they would be willing to help you. I can tell you, any of you today, you can come see me after church. I'll give you my contact information, and I will share every resource. My accountant is local, my attorney is local. Both of them are on retainer. I pay them because I have so much business. What retainer does is it actually, and we have a short amount of time, but retainer does is it puts you ahead of the line. So if you have an issue, they'll usually move you up to the front. It kind of makes you VIP, and you don't have to worry about it. But if you're not on retainer, then you got to get on their calendar, and you might have to wait a couple weeks. But my retainer right now with my attorney is $10,000, and I keep that on the books so we don't have to worry about any legal issues. Because often in business, people will try to sue you, even the employees. Everybody want to sue you. I hear it at least once a week, we going to sue you. And I say, okay, see my attorney. I have a team of them.
We're on our time. Last thing I would say, just again from my own personal experience, is that you can't spend everything that you bring in, especially when you're starting a business. There's owner draws and just different ways creatively that you can bring the stream in. Now, you can take it if you want. When you have your own business, you can take as much money as you want as long as you pay taxes on it. But when things come up and things that you need to pay out of the business, you have to have the resources and the money to do that. There's what's called cost of doing business. Right. And no matter what business that you do or you're in, there's going to be a cost. So there's going to be a sacrifice. Again, don't just think that even if you're by yourself and you're doing consulting or whatever, that you're going to be able to bring on that money. You're still going to have to pay for some stuff. So you need to have the money back so when them things come up, you have the resources in order to do that. Yes, ma'am.
The type of business you set up is really, really important. Make sure you do not set up a sole proprietor. You want to make sure you at least have a LLC. You want to separate your business from yourself. I know so many people who had their business set up incorrectly, and if somebody sue you, they take everything you got, including your business assets.
Yes. And you can be working as a sole proprietor and still be an LLC. So there's a misnomer of thinking that if you're by yourself, you need to be a sole proprietor, but you can shift it. So again, can you put your hands together for what you've heard? And our panel who's done an excellent job. Hopefully we've just scratched the surface of those of you, and maybe out of this session, some of you have been thinking about doing a business, no matter how big or how small it is. I challenge you, don't wait. Start working on it now and then ask God. And like I told you, the business that I've done, as God gives me insight, I also do my job to try to get information about it. But sometimes I look back at Pastor Hawkins will tell you that when he was doing his radio station, I said, I think I want to do a radio station. And then as I started working on that, I realized I had a person in my church who done radio, another person have done some other stuff. So then I had to do the back end of learning the software and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, I look back sometimes like, how did I do that? I don't remember how I did it. But those of us who are Christians, we also have the Holy Ghost. We also have God that will give us insight and revelation that he don't always give everybody else. So you can't just totally rely on that. You also have to do your research and your training and your education on the back end, like Discretor Usher was saying, to make sure you have a team in place. And until you have that team, you got to do the research. You got to do the work. All right, so one more time, put your hands together. So we have one more session. I know y'all fading off. This is only going to be an intentional 1-hour service. The preacher is here. We're going to have a song that's going to be sung in order to get us ready to be motivated, inspired, and prepared for this evening service. I trust that you don't fade off, and I'm glad to see those of you I know. Pastor McGee, she's a realtor, so she's in business for herself, has been doing that for many years, so she also can tell you about that. I know Pastor Brewer, I know he does business, he does repairs and construction. So we have people in the audience who also do business. Minister Training back there, he has property. So we have people, but hopefully this panel has also gave some of you maybe some other ways of other creative, because again, you heard Pastor Cooper, he started out one way, but he branched out. And I think the last thing I will say is don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid that if you start something, it don't work. It's not a failure. It maybe is a prerequisite to something better. So I did a business for a year. I had an organic store. And again, people was asking, how's that store going? So again, when I closed the store, in your mind, you're like, I don't want people to think it's a failure. But I realized I wasn't a failure, that I was big enough to say this is not working. But it was something to prepare me, because here's a testament. I'll say it very quick. I was telling District Usher, when me and her was in business together, we had looked at a piece of property that we was going to put one of the offices in. And at that particular time, they wouldn't rent for us because it was a conflict. You remember that? But that very piece of property that they would not rent from us is now a property that I own. So no matter how small or how large it is, ask God, if what you're doing is what he wants you to do. And if he wants you to do something bigger or something smaller, don't be afraid to launch out into the deep. You have some good resources. I'm sure all of them, and even those in the audience who've been in business, will be there to help you. They're not going to do the work for you. Don't waste their time, but you have good resources to help you. So one more time, put your hands together. We're going to start. You've had plenty of breaks. If you need to use the restroom real quick, but we're going to start at 3:40 as our program says. Hopefully you'll stay for this last session, and then those of you who are here, hopefully you'll be here for night service.